Well, I need to tell a story on myself as I was meandering here at, I got a call at 10:21, and the concerned message was, "You're usually here by this time," and I'm thinking, yeah, it's only 10:21, service starts at 11, what's the big deal? I I bounce from here to other congregations, and everybody starts at a different time, and the schedule always changes, and so I thank you for that reminder. But as I pulled into the driveway, I thought, oh, shoot. It was 10:30, right? Okay. All right. So it reminded me of a story a couple years ago, not terribly long ago, the first time in 35 years that I missed a funeral. I didn't miss it. I was only an hour and a half late. It happened to be in Pelkey, and we had just gotten back from vacation, and it was the next day, and I was out cleaning the garage and putting all of our camping stuff away, and I get a phone call saying, well, are you showing up or what? So, yeah, they waited, and she was buried, and that was okay. So the UU theme for April is the gift of interdependence, and Earth Day is tomorrow, but I've not personally been able to let go of last month's talk by Carol Grafford on why she smiles so much. Happiness is very much about interdependence, and when you're ADHD, you can combine all kinds of things and come up with the theme of interdependence. So I asked, and there was and Juxta and I didn't get a chance to go over this morning. Do you want to put that first highlighted thing on there? Oh, okay, all right. Okay, so there's not many highlighted things this morning, so I will read it to you. The question is this, I'm asking you, is happiness dependent upon independence, or is it dependent on interdependence? Your happiness, our happiness, is it dependent upon independence or interdependence? Then the next question that follows that is, what does my happiness or well-being have to do with yours? A few mornings after Carol's talk on how a specific physical challenge for her led to an understanding to how to live with an attitude of happiness, the next morning, literally, I half woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning with a bunch of thoughts that had been forming all night in my unconscious or subconscious. Carol's statement, "This is why I smile so much," brought back some memories of my college days and my incessant conversations with my housemate. Well, Eric was studying philosophy, and I was studying religion. And looking back, it is clear that we were both very depressed. At least I know I was, and I just confirmed this with him a few days ago. And we talked, and back in those days, we talked all the time. We shared our dark thoughts with each other constantly. I happened to be taking a very heavy load in school, more than my brain could handle. And I was taking a philosophy class on Soren Kierkegaard, a religion class on Marxism and alienation, an independent study on the French theologian and historian Jacques Ellul, and then to top it off, a Russian lit class on Dostoevsky. Yeah, it was kind of a deep dive into the deep hole of existentialism. So to balance things off, however, I just want to tell you, I was also taking a modern dance class. So that helped me make a fool out of myself is what it did. Well, Eric and I had a friend named Julie, not related to the person to whom I am married currently, but her name was Julie. And in contrast to Eric and myself, Julie was happy. She seemed honestly happy, and we couldn't figure it out. Was she faking it? Didn't she know what life was really like? Was she an idiot like Dostoevsky's character in his book, The Idiot, named Prince Mishkin, who was entirely positive with an absolutely beautiful nature? So we were wondering if she was really an idiot in our midst. If she only knew how much we talked about her and secretly admired her is what we were really doing. We were too self-absorbed and cynical to admit it, but we were depressed and loving every minute of it, you know? So I woke up that Monday morning with that memory, and of course, as my brain does, it automatically goes to songs and lyrics. And one of the most depressing songwriters that I've ever known is Jackson Browne. So a couple lines from Jackson Browne. He sang, this was vintage that time period. I'm sitting down by the highway side. Everybody's going somewhere, riding just as fast as they can ride. I guess they got a lot to do before they can rest assured their lives are justified. Well, I've been up and down this highway. This is Jackson Browne continuing. I've been up and down this highway as far as my eye can see. No matter how fast I run, I can't seem to get away from me. No matter where I am, I can't help thinking I'm just a day away from where I want to be. Well, in those days, I'd be singing those depressing songs, stuff like that, at the top of my lungs, like a drunk rooster crowing at the moon or something. And now I think back and I think, yuck, what was I doing? Then, of course, the next song lyric that comes into my head is this one by Sheryl Crow. If it makes you happy, it can't be that bad. If it makes you happy, then why the hell are you so sad? I need medication, I know. Lyrics like those, become generational anthems. They are the soundtrack of our lives at different times, and that's why I loved listening to Carol's story a month ago, because we've all got a story about who we are and why we are the way that we are. And sadly, some of those stories are like commandments that we grew up with, rules by which we have learned about who we are and who we will always be, like a script that we live and can seldom change or rewrite, unless we are given permission, or we give ourselves permission to break those life commandments, which is also a very traumatic experience to have. It can be, anyway. Well, that depression that I lived in college had likely been lurking in the shadows since I was young, and it never got acknowledged, and I never acknowledged it either because I couldn't recognize it by myself. So later, when people suggested that I was depressed, I claimed, well, it gives me a creative edge, This depression helps me. Listening to depressing songs inspires me to write papers in college and to write sermons every Sunday for years. Why would I ever want to change that? Why would I give that up? So that's basically what I said to a psychologist during a very hard time in my life shortly after moving here. I sought him out and I challenged him to give me honest feedback. And he did. One of those was by telling me that I was full of crap and didn't need to stay depressed. Well, to which I promptly replied that he too was full of crap for telling me that. We had a great relationship, and we still do. Another song from Jackson Browne. It's so hard to come by that feeling of peace. And this friend of mine said, close your eyes, try a few of these. I thought I was flying like a bird so far above my sorrow, but when I looked down, I was on my knees. Now I need someone to help me. Please. Close your eyes and try a few of these. Here's my disclaimer. I've never done that kind of drugs, and I never will. My psychologist, however, wanted me to try antidepressants and ADHD meds and talk a lot, and it took a while. But when the scales fell from my eyes, I realized that I really, really honestly didn't know that I could be happy. I didn't know what happiness was. I didn't know that I could thrive without the blunt and numbing feeling that I thought gave me this creative edge. I began to recognize the obstacles that kept me from being happy. And now I can see those obstacles coming at me and have learned a bit about that great martial arts technique, which is also a Buddhist teaching about letting energy come and letting it go. And not doing this, but letting it come and letting it pass through, noticing it on its journey toward you, noticing it in you, and then letting it go past you or through you without harming you. Let it come and let it go, like breathing. So these days, you know, we probably all hear the word happiness all the time. What's up with that anyway? Is it because we are unhappy or going through a very unsettling time with all the things going on in our lives? And so I hear Bobby McFerrin whistle and sing. Here's a little song I wrote. You might want to sing it note for note. Don't worry. Be happy. In every life we have some trouble, but when you worry, you make it double. Don't worry. Be happy. And then Julie and I go to the Bob Marley movie, One Love, and start singing along. Don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be all right. Well, that's a soundtrack. Both of those songs are soundtracks from our lives. That last song by Bob Marley is also a song that was born in adversity. It's not a happy-go-lucky song at all. Happiness is not about being free and clear of adversity. Happiness is living with it and robbing it of its negative power in our lives. But happiness is in the news a lot. According to the World Happiness Report, which some of you perhaps have heard about, for the 7th year in a row, Finland ranked as the happiest country in the world, which prompted a conversation with a friend and local native Finn who can't understand why Finland comes in first when they also have a really high rate of alcoholism. And to him, he would say, the highest rate of alcoholism in the world. And to him, Finland brings up images of a long row of dour-looking men at a bar looking like this. Which is kind of what he looks like, yeah. Well, why Finland? Well, the director of international marketing at Business Finland says, and I quote, and I'm always very careful to try to quote and source things because Vicky's present and she's always checking on whether somebody really said this or not, and I really appreciate that because I've stolen people's lines for years and now I need to get better at it. But this is a quote. It was on the radio, so it must be true, okay? Finnish happiness boils down to the simple things in life, connecting with nature, caring for one's mind and body, and appreciating design and art around us. Well, I was at Suomi in Finlandia when they were really working for that art and design program based on Finnish culture and technique and philosophy. But that also sounds very much like a business and marketing person, what they would say, right? Well, then psychology. Researcher and philosopher Frank Martella says this is not a natural God-given happiness. It's all thanks to 3 specific tenets within Finnish society. Number 1, a strong sense of community and relatedness. The second is doing good deeds for other people, like calling somebody at 20 after 10 and saying, are you coming or what? And the last one is finding a clear purpose for one's self. Well, that sounds maybe like Frank Martella is a Unitarian Universalist. I don't know. Are you happy? Well, that was the opening question from American Public Media radio show 1A on April 2nd on happiness. Are you happy? It's a fundamentally American question set forth in our Declaration of Independence. Life, liberty, and the pursuit, but not the promise of, happiness. Which raises questions like, do I have a right to be happy? Does my happiness depend on you? If so, does yours then depend on me? Well, the UU theme, as I said this month, is interdependence, so it must be right, correct? Our happiness depends on each other. This World Happiness Report released in March showed that happiness in this country, our country, has dropped. We are now ranked the 23rd happiest country in the world, down from 15th place last year. The category of Americans, and this is probably where it really tipped this year, the category of Americans aged 25 and under fell the most. Sadly, we experience that reality in different ways in our lives. We who have kids, we who know young people whose lives are significantly challenged in ways that us old-timers don't really understand, because things have changed. Well, the top 10 countries on the list are Finland, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, Israel, the Netherlands, Norway, Luxembourg. Have you heard of that country? Yeah, Luxembourg, Switzerland, and Australia. So the question becomes, what characteristics do these countries share? And I source another person, Eric Weiner, author of The Geography of Bliss, who describes it as contentment. Not happiness, but contentment, or happiness is contentment, and having high levels of trust in your government, in your neighbors, another interesting challenge today, and for strangers as well. And then interpersonal relationships in these countries tend to be strong. Well, there's another person I thought had some interesting things to say about this. She is developmental psychologist Mariam Abdullah from UC Berkeley. She noted that in yearly studies by the Centers for Disease Control, they note that in the last 10 years, the CDC is seeing more students reporting persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness, and increasing trend toward greater mental health challenges. So the definition of happiness, changes all the time. Perhaps today it doesn't or shouldn't mean a little emoji with a smiling face on it. It shouldn't be a feel-good or just a pleasurable sensation. But then it makes me wonder, who gets to define these things? Who gets to define what happiness is? And I'm thinking we do. Every one of us gets to participate in this definition. It's becoming common to think of happiness as having a deeper contentment, a meaningful and a purposeful life. Those who are able to think through what happiness is and what it means also recognize, however, that one factor must be included, and that's obstacles to happiness. Thank you to Carol Grafford for pointing that out, how that works, okay? People who give a lot of thought to this recognize that there are factors that are obstacles to happiness that must be included in our definition of what happiness is. So Anushka Pali is one of these, and she is a Buddhist meditation teacher and leadership coach in San Francisco, who says we have a certain baseline for happiness, measured by things like, well, if I get that thing, then I'll be happy, right? It's a one-to-one relationship. But she asks a counter question: what is happiness if it's not just getting what we want? Which reminded me of another line from musician Sheryl Crow. It's not having what you want, it's wanting what you've got. Now, no criticism to Sheryl Crow, because I'm a fan, but wanting wanting what you've got is easier when one has what one needs to survive or even to thrive. And Anushka Pali notes that happiness is actually an internal state that can be cultivated. Well-being is in part a balance and a resilience amidst all the things that happen in our lives that are sometimes not within our control. There is a baseline that provides a foundation for our well-being. Things like food security, things like shelter, education, health care. How many times have you as a senior citizen been asked by someone, are you safe at home or in your community? Could ask anybody that question, are you safe in your community? All of these factors that she brings up, I think, are things that drive the United States lower on the happiness scale and raises other countries up. Which is really sad because so many of these obstacles are simply unnecessary. But to her point, being happy or content can happen through cultivating one's heart and one's mind in characteristics and practices like, and Carol would be the first to mention these as well, gratitude, goodwill, compassion, altruism, connecting with and caring for others. And I'd like to redefine what being othered means, because otherness is also something that gets us out of our self-involved isolation and does wonders for our mental health. So reframe that word, not to other somebody, which is a very negative thing to do, and we need to keep that one on one side of our brain. The other side of othering someone is to reach out to them. Now, Danish people, going back to the statistics, Danish people, number 2 in the world happiness survey, have the lowest expectations, apparently. Well, that's interesting. Not pegging your happiness to a particular outcome is a different approach for our normal. The pandemic and current world events have especially caused young people to feel that they don't have control over certain aspects of their lives. This kind of alienation, whether you're studying it in college or you're just experiencing it in your life, which is a much more true way of understanding what alienation is, it can be debilitating, but is also now reportedly leading to an interesting rise in popularity of Stoic philosophy and the belief that we don't control outside events, but reframing our mind leads us to control our reactions to those events. Thank you again to Carol Grafford. Expectations might be a conversation today for all ages, and it might be an interesting one to have with our youngsters. Now, it was interesting also that the country of Bhutan, this tiny Buddhist kingdom in the Himalayas or the Himalayas, however you want to pronounce that, has a policy, some of you may know this, of gross national happiness. Isn't that cool? The idea that we should pursue something more than the GDP. Wow, what a novel idea, huh? Author Eric Weiner had a conversation with a man who happened to be named Karma in this Buddhist country, which is interesting, in Bhutan, and he told him that he personally, Eric Weiner, was working on his personal happiness, as if this was going to make this guy respond in a certain way. But Karma's response was this: Eric, what is it with you Americans and your personal happiness? Happiness is not personal. It's 100% relational. Well, the former king of Bhutan, who came up with this idea of gross national happiness in the 1970s, probably because he was listening to depressing music like I was and decided to change his mind somehow, he said, for a very small country like Bhutan with an even smaller population, Now hear this, please. It is extremely vital that we have a shared national objective. We simply cannot afford to work in different directions. Now don't just react to that and think about why that won't work in the United States. Just think about it. We simply cannot afford to work in different directions. And let that pile of bags under my table remind us of that. So what is important to people in Iceland? It is said, you don't have to worry about falling into a black hole in Iceland because there's no black hole to fall into. Someone, not necessarily the government, someone will catch you if you slip. We have a lot of work to do. So we all know that. Preaching to the choir here. So where do we start? And I heard some interesting comments in this series of interviews I was listening to. Perhaps we start with, one place to start would be with simple conversations to stimulate thinking and incremental change in attitude. So, for example, instead of asking someone where they are from, as we are very prone to do in a college community, see what happens if you ask things like this. What's important in your life? What do you care the most about? What does it mean to have a good life and to be a good person? Are you part of groups or organizations? If so, tell me about that. Who are the caring people that you are connected to in your life? Or who are the people that you care the most about? How do you define happiness? What does it mean to you to have a life well lived? And you can go on a different level, perhaps a deeper level, and ask things like this. What is going well for you in your life? What might be preventing things from going well in your life? And what is your story about happiness? So my conclusion is this. Our happiness is very much dependent upon our interdependence. And may that understanding become an anthem, a new soundtrack for our lives and times. And with that, I will sit while we do another song. Okay.